The plates clinked on the scarred wooden table as my aunt passed the bread basket to my father. The air inside my family's narrow Madrid apartment was thick with the smells of garlic and olive oil, but also tension, old dusted, unsaid things. I watched my little cousin chase a pea around his plate while the adults set on each other with quiet fury, never quite breaking one another, never letting anything really heal. I felt like an interloper even as I sat at my usual seat, back pressed against limestone wall made yellow by decades of cigarette smoke. Pintor, my Uncle Manuel said, the word slow and bitten off like a joke he didn't want to tell. You want to be a painter? My hands were wet, sweating, tucked in my lap. I saw my father's face drawn with disappointment and a tired ache. Across from me, my mother's hand fluttered to her pearls. I cleared my throat. Yes, I said, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. It's what I want most. Aunt Rosa drew in her chin. You want to starve most, you mean? No one lives off paint. I waited for someone to come to my defense. Only the wall clock filled the silence, ticking over each second. My resolve began to buckle. My little cousin was humming to himself, dipping bread in his soup like none of this mattered. My father finally spoke without looking at me. We work hard. Your grandfather was a cobbler. I have worked 30 years repairing shoes so that you could study law or accounting. Think, Javier, think, what is this madness? I couldn't look at him. I felt my cheeks burning with humiliation, not so much at wanting something different, but at how very alone this wish made me. I mumbled something about this being my calling, but it sounded weak, even to myself. They broke out in a chorus of laughter, sharp and pitying. His calling, Aunt Rosa said, pressing the napkin to her mouth to stifle her giggling. El pintor famoso. Uncle Manuel raised his glass. To the next Velázquez, he cackled. My mother watched me, eyes watery. I tried to remember that she loved me, but love didn't make her brave. Let's eat, she said quietly, ending all argument. Nobody looked at me for the rest of the meal. That night, I listened to the city's noise from my tiny room. Laughter echoed below my window from some bar where people didn't have to justify who they were. I stared up at the water stains blooming on the ceiling and told myself it didn't matter. But shame curled up inside like something alive. I told myself I'd show them. I told myself again and again that someday they'd be proud. My first canvas after that was a mess of rage, wide, violent swathes of red, blue, and black. I painted by night, washing the brushes in the bathtub, hiding the canvases behind old boxes and winter coats. In the mornings, I left the house and trudged to my job at a framing shop on Gran Via, where I spent hours looking at other people's work and imagining mine in their place. I entered competitions. I left my portfolio in cafes where gallery owners had once been rumored to sit. I sent out emails 40 at a time and waited for the rain of rejections. Sometimes, when I'd get 2 or 3 in a single day, I'd walk the streets of Madrid until midnight, following the tram lines, pretending I was going somewhere nobody else could see. When my friends began to marry and save for houses, I sold old clothes to buy paint. When they gathered for drinks, I told them stories about patrons and commissions that weren't true. Shame was a cage, and I lived in it. Still, I painted. Years passed that way, work, paint, rejection. I moved out, taking a room in a shared flat above a bakery in Malasaña. Some months the rent came late. Other months the landlord would bang on my door, threatening to throw me out. Always the family asked, "So, have we been in a museum yet? When will we see your name on the posters?" My father stopped inviting me to dinners. He sent polite texts at Christmas, his resignation folded between the lines. Madrid changed while I scraped by, shuttered shops reopened as galleries or cocktail bars. Foreign tourists swarmed the Prado. Sometimes I'd walk the museums, my hands trembling to think what it'd mean to belong inside these walls. The turning point when it finally came snuck up quietly. My former boss at the framing shop, an old man named Mateo with gentle hands, called to say a gallery near Sol needed a mural painted, a commission left unfinished by someone who'd fallen ill. "You have 2 days," he said, "show them something good." Nerves shook every brushstroke from my hands, but I worked through the long Madrid dusk, listening to distant motorbikes buzzing through the streets. When the mural was done, it was nothing pleasant. Rough hands, sweating brows, a street scene full of rumors and dust and sun. The gallery owner fidgeted next to me as she looked, then made a humming sound deep in her throat. "Strong," she said, "hungry, I like it." I got paid more in 2 weeks than I'd earned in the past 6 months. With that, things began to change. The mural got photographed, shared online, reposted by a popular architect. Suddenly galleries started emailing me, not the other way around. One night a rich French collector walked into my flat, made an offer on everything I had. I watched him leave with two of my favorite works, my heart twisting with joy and grief. I was being seen, not universally loved, not yet, but at least visible. With every show, every sale, something in me loosened. I could walk into a bar and say, I'm Javier, I paint, and not flinch. I moved into a better apartment, light and high-ceilinged, with room for a real studio. But when I called my mother or father, the conversation always slipped around my art, like it was a stain we were both skirting. Then out of nowhere came the invitation, a solo show at the Reina Sofía. Even now, years later, the memory makes me tremble. It didn't seem real, not even when I saw the paperwork, my name in the subject line, the director's signature in blue pen. The setup week was a blur of exhaustion and pride, painting until my elbows ached, smoking cigarettes on the museum steps while the city slid into spring. Opening night, the gallery rooms were blinding under the spotlights, my canvases spread out like wounds for the crowd to stare at. I wore a suit borrowed from a friend, hair still smelling of turpentine. I tried not to bite my nails. That morning I had called my parents. There's an opening tonight, I said, voice flat, if you want. Or if you're busy, I understand. We'll come, my mother said after a long pause. Don't worry about your father. At 7, the place was already humming. Waiters moved through the rooms with trays of kava, a tide of people flowing around them. I scanned their faces, not sure what I was looking for. Critics, other artists, suit-clad directors, wide-eyed tourists. Somewhere in the crush, my old teacher from school, his beard even whiter than I remembered, caught my arm and squeezed it. You did it, Javier, he said. Does it feel as you expected? I shook my head. I felt like I was floating, a singular knot of hope and dread. I saw them then, my parents. My father in his navy jacket and pressed shirt, my mother clinging to his arm. They stood near the entrance, uncertain, as if afraid to brush up against the artwork. From the other rooms, laughter and voices spilled. They looked fantastically out of place. I walked over, feeling my pulse rattle in my chest. For a moment we just stood there, me facing them, waiting for the walls to crash down. My mother reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve. It's beautiful, Javier, she said gently. My father looked at me, then past me, as if searching for something safer than my face. I saw his jaw tense, saw him fighting for words. We walked into the main gallery. It was busy there, people murmuring over a 12-foot canvas splashed with ochre and jet, a portrait of a young shoemaker bending over his bench, hands browning leather to a fine shine. It was the first painting I'd ever dared try in the big way, a tribute I had once sworn I'd never show anyone, my life broken into brushstrokes. My father stopped dead, staring at the painting. His hand came up, trembling slightly, to touch the air where the hands in the canvas were. The crowd behind us stilled, sensing something in his posture. For a long moment, all I could hear was my heart and the distant squeak of gallery doors. Finally, he turned to me. Tears stood in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. That's your grandfather, he said, his voice cracked. You remembered. I nodded, unable to speak. He looked at me differently then, seeing finally the thing I had tried to offer for years. Not just paint, not just ambition, but memory, family, something lasting. Aunt Rosa and Uncle Manuel came an hour later, swept up in the crowd by a friend who had bragged he knew the artist. I watched them pause in the doorway, scanning the placards on the wall, piecing together what this meant. When they reached me, they were quiet, composed. Aunt Rosa gave a small, breathless laugh. It's all yours, she whispered. I nodded. She ran a hand down her dress, smoothing fabric, eyes searching for some anchor. I didn't know, she said. I'm proud. Behind her, Uncle Manuel huffed out a bark of laughter, but it was different now, awe and bruised pride. Our Javier, he said, making Madrid look. By the end of the night, cameras had flashed, hands were shaken, and critics scribbled in notebooks. But nothing compared to the sight of my family, huddled together in front of my paintings, talking about colors, about technique, slowly, shyly, allowing themselves to be impressed. The city outside was velvet black as I walked my parents to their car. My mother fussed over my tie, my father patted my shoulder, each in their own awkward way. Javier, my father said softly, I am sorry, He couldn't finish. He didn't have to. I placed my hand over his and squeezed gently, letting the silence do what words never could. When they drove away, the taillights flickering red over the cobblestones, I stood in the cool night, the tips of my fingers still tingling with old nerves and new hope. All was quiet, but I could feel the city breathing, soft, alive, full of possibility. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and sunlight streaming through the window. I stood barefoot on the cold tiles of my kitchen, looking at my stained hands, my reflection in the glass. I thought of that dinner table, the laughter, the shame that had flooded my bones. I thought of every time I'd wanted to give up. I brewed coffee, then took my mug to the balcony. Below, the city pulsed with life, early traffic, children in school uniforms, dogs barking in the distance. I could hear a neighbor playing guitar, soft and meandering. From the street, a group of strangers paused to take photos of the posters announcing my show, my name in bold black letters beneath the museum's logo. One of them, a girl with a backpack, looked up and caught my eye. She raised a hand and smiled, a small, honest gesture, recognition. I smiled back. I remembered then the feeling of painting alone in that cramped childhood bedroom, the sick twist of loneliness, the acid bite of shame. I understood finally that all of it, the hurt, the anger, the nights spent hungry or frightened, had poured itself into my work. I could never erase those years, nor would I want to. They were my colors, my canvas, my return. I turned and went inside. Today I would paint.